This VAWatchdog.org news video is brought to you by Bergman & Moore, LLC. Former VA attorneys now fighting VA for you. Call Bergman & Moore at 877-838-2889 or on the web at vetlawyers.com.
U.S. soldiers everywhere today observe the 233rd anniversary of the Army's founding by the Continental Congress in 1775. 7 years later, General George Washington established the Purple Heart. The medal became a way to honor those wounded or killed in combat. But as Randall Pinkston explains, some veterans are now trying to change the criteria for earning it.
Hide AKs in between mattresses.
Captain Luis Montalban, seen here in videos shot by his Army buddies, was on his second tour of duty in Iraq.
As the attackers slashed me with their knives, I fired off several shots from my pistol and killed him.
When he was ambushed near a Syrian border crossing,
I sustained a blunt force trauma to my back. I was essentially paralyzed.
The physical injuries healed, but 2 years later, after he left the Army, Montalban was diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Do you have flashbacks?
Yeah. I'll hear something that reminds me of a gunshot or an explosion, and I'll automatically reach for, my M4.
Of more than 1.5 million U.S. military who've served in Iraq and Afghanistan, 300,000, like Montalban, have PTSD symptoms.
He is also awarded the Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device.
For his service and injuries, Montalban has more than 30 military commendations and medals, including a Purple Heart.
For wounds received in action on 21 December 2003 in Iraq.
But the Purple Heart is for his physical injuries, not PTSD.
I've been awarded a Purple Heart.
Former Marine Lieutenant Robert Mueller was partially paralyzed from wounds he received in Vietnam.
Took a bullet through the chest, and that qualified.
Mueller, who heads a veterans group, thinks PTSD victims should also be eligible for the Purple Heart, a medal traditionally only given for physical injuries, not psychological illnesses.
We're not talking about an illness, we're talking about an injury. When you go to war and you have psychic trauma, that's an injury.
But Montalban, now a graduate student at Columbia University, doesn't agree.
There's a distinction between those who engage the enemy and those who suffer psychologically from incidents that may in fact have nothing to do with contact with the enemy.
The Purple Heart has been around more than 2 centuries. General George Washington made the first presentations. The criteria for receiving the award have changed several times.
Last month, Defense Secretary Robert Gates opened up the possibility of awarding a Purple Heart to PTSD troops. He said it was an interesting idea, clearly something that needs to be looked into. But Mueller believes Gates should focus on the larger issue, mental illness in the military.
I'm looking at all these troops that are going out there for 4, 5, 6 deployments, and I'm telling you, we're going to have a big problem here.
Supporters of changing the rules for awarding the Purple Heart say it could be one way of removing the stigma some soldiers feel about admitting they are suffering from mental stress. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
VAWatchdog.org, the nation's #1 independent veterans website. On the web at VAWatchdog.org.